So again, my name is Lindsay Cosma. I am the director of marketing here at Food Smart, where we connect people to nutrition support, including a dietitian, as well as daily tools to make eating well simple. I also hold a Master of Nutrition Science and Policy from Tufts University, and I've spent a considerable amount of time, both academically, personally, as well as professionally, researching and supporting women in nutrition. And I find women's health particularly fulfilling to focus on because it's an area of health and well-being that is historically very understudied and underfunded. And there have been a lack of resources to support women with their unique needs. And as you'll see today, and as I am sure many of you have undoubtedly experienced firsthand, if you are a woman joining us, we go through so many different phases and stages and changes throughout our lifetime. And so particularly from our kind of reproductive years through to menopause. And so the need for nuanced support at each of those phases is really significant. And we're going to touch on a lot of those here today. So yeah, what I hope to do during this webinar is to call attention to some of those specific needs as they relate to nutrition and offer some insight and guidance about areas that you may want to focus on within each of those phases. Yep. So before we jump in, I do want to let you know that by attending this webinar, you will have a chance to win your choice of a $250 prize. That's either a $250 Amazon gift card or both a Fitbit and a glass meal prep kit from Williams-Sonoma. So all you have to do is book an initial or follow-up visit with a dietitian. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that entails a little later. But book it by the end of the month, so 5/31, using the code WOMAN. That's WOMAN, not EN. And visits cost as low as $0 depending on your health insurance. So I encourage you all to just take a second and book a dietitian visit using the link that my colleague Jared will drop in the chat for you. And then, of course, reach out. You can reach out in the chat if you have any questions while you're scheduling. So go ahead and drop that link in. Perfect. Thanks, Jared. All right. So the agenda for today, we are first going to kind of align together on this common definition of women's health. So we're on the same page as we kind of go through today's discussion. We are also going to talk about the specific role of nutrition as an area of focus. We will dip our toes into hormones and discuss some of the major ones at play and what it means to pursue this idea of balance. Then we are going to get a little more granular, looking at some of the defining features of each significant stage in a woman's life and some of the nutritional considerations to be aware of at each of those phases. And then we will wrap up and leave a little bit of time for a live Q&A at the end. So if all of that sounds good, we will go ahead and jump in. All right. Yeah, so let's talk women's health. Perfect. All right. So women's health can mean a lot of different things, but for the purpose of our discussion today, we are going to define it as this pursuit of a holistic approach to well-being. And that encompasses physical, emotional, and social aspects that empower women through education, preventative care, personalized treatments to achieve balanced health and vitality in and throughout their lives. So as we're going through, I know that's a lot to kind of take in, but it encompasses a lot and it should. So we'll talk about each of those kind of aspects. All right, so quickly pivoting to, all right, we've got this great definition of women's health, but what, it sounds wonderful, right? But I want to acknowledge that there are really very real barriers that get in the way of achieving this kind of ideal state of well-being and vitality and its kind of completeness there. So I want to read off a couple of these different aspects because remember, we talked about it by definition, women's health is going to include all of these aspects. And so some of the things that can get in the way are maybe lack of access to healthcare. So there can be an economic reason, geographically, maybe you don't have healthcare facilities near to you. So those can be issues for sure. Limited information. There's so much information out there. Anyone who's been spent 2 minutes on the internet or on any TV knows how much, this diet and that diet and eat this and don't eat that. It's just a lot to kind of take in and know what's right for you. So that can be difficult. There are societal and cultural pressures, right? So historically, women have played kind of caretakers in the home. That's very fluid and changing, but it does still exist in some capacities. And so that typically means a focus off of the woman herself and maybe onto others. Um, Time constraints. I'm sure probably everyone here has some kind of restriction around being busy or not having a lot of time to focus on some of these things. Maybe it's multiple responsibilities. Maybe we've got kids, families, working, whatever it is. So prioritizing self-care can take a back seat sometimes. Healthcare system challenges. Like I said, it's a really underfunded and under-researched area. And so there's not as much data on the specifics around women's healthcare and kind of recommendations there. There are a lot of really great practitioners and a lot of change has been made in this area, but it is still something that we see. Psychological barriers, stress, anxiety, maybe there's a stigma around mental health or that's something you have going on as well that can make it hard to prioritize eating well, for example, if you've got other things on your mind. Environmental factors can get in the way, toxic exposures, unsafe living conditions, things like that. And then lifestyle factors. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is related to diet, but also, sedentary lifestyle, lack of physical activity that could be, due to some of these other things. Maybe it's time, maybe it's physical limitations around disability. It could be so many different things. So the purpose of this is just to kind of say, not all of these at all are going to be applicable to everyone, but this is a representation of the kinds of issues that women could face at a population level. But individually, I bet many of you can identify with maybe one or two of these barriers that maybe you've experienced when you're trying to pursue your own health and wellness kind of journey there. So, obviously, here at Food Smart and today, we are going to focus on nutrition. And we're going to do that because it actually has a really fundamental role in our overall well being as one of the major inputs that we have direct control over. So, focusing on nutrition can have a myriad effects on all kinds of things, including our physical and mental health. And eating in a way that nourishes us can improve our physical ability, allowing us to be more active. It can improve our overall health, sometimes even reversing certain conditions. Um, there's this direct connection. Back to the other slide, Jared. Thanks. There's this direct connection between what we eat and our mental well-being. So that includes how well we focus on and cope with anxiety and stress. And then it can also ensure that we're getting consistent restful sleep and have enough energy to go throughout our days. So we can see this kind of cascade effect where improving how we eat can actually improve all of these other fundamental areas of our lives. And that frees up time and space to pursue other resources that improve our overall well-being. So a quick example of this might be maybe you begin eating better and your diabetes improves, let's say. Perhaps you're able to maybe reduce or stop a medication or have fewer doctor's visits. So that frees up money, right? Spent on medication and also time going to and from the doctor. And so maybe that allows you to have a little bit more money to reinvest maybe into some healthier foods or to reassess different aspects of your home life that are causing stress and make some improvements there. So, whatever the specifics are, the general pattern kind of holds true, right? And it makes nutrition this really essential element to our health, and something worth really focusing on kind of first or as a core element of how we're thinking about our overall well-being. So, what does good nutrition look like, right? If it's this thing that's at the center of everything, then what do we need to do actually to establish this baseline of good nutrition? So we are going to get really specific here in a few slides related to hormones and kind of stages of life. But first, I just want to cover a couple of principles that are supportive to nearly everyone. And it's good to look at these as just the foundation of good health. So a place to start, if you will. So the first one's going to be aiming for a balanced diet of proteins, fats, and carbs. You've probably heard that since you were in fifth grade, right? Balanced plate, make sure it's balanced. But as much as we hear it, I think it actually doesn't happen as often as we might think. If we do start looking at our plates, and I know I've done this, I'm like, is this plate really balanced or is it three-quarters pasta and a little bit of protein and no green. Sometimes that happens, and sometimes that's fine, but aiming for balance most of the time is a good kind of rule of thumb. The other thing there is cram in colors, or you may have heard like eat the rainbow. So I like to aim for at least three or more colors on my plate. So the American diet is really beige. It's a lot of like white bread, pasta, beige, sauces, creams, fried foods. It tends to look kind of bland. So I think just having a visual cue of color is a really great way to say, am I getting enough variety here? And color is actually directly related to how many nutrients are in your food. So it's a quick way to kind of assess that. The next thing is, am I eating regularly and am I eating enough? A lot of times women are actually under eating. There's a lot of influences as for why that is. Diet culture, pressure from society, all kinds of things, right? This idea that we should be under eating, but actually like a 2 or 3 year old needs about 13 to 1500 calories a day. So, that's a lot of food and we are not 3 year olds. So it's important that we're eating enough to actually fuel our bodies adequately to do all that we are regularly asking of them. The next one is to hydrate with electrolytes. So this could mean a little pinch of salt in the water if you're active, or maybe choosing spring water or mineral water. It helps to get the hydration where it needs to go. Our water can be really stripped of minerals, and so adding some of those back in is a good idea. Um, Next is eating mostly whole foods. So this can feel a little bit kind of top shelf, but I like to define this as basically anything where the ingredients are only or as close to just the food itself, right? So it doesn't have to be all fresh food. It could be frozen, it could be canned, but maybe it's like if you're eating peas, it's peas rather than like, I don't know, an example for peas, some boxed pea meal with a bunch of different ingredients, basically focusing on getting the food itself most of the time. So that's fruit and veggies. It can mean, even canned meats, fresh meats, frozen meats, grains, nuts, seeds, all of those things. Generally, we want to limit sugar or refined sugar specifically, as well as ultra processed foods. So there's a lot of merit to processed foods. They can be financially viable, they can be easy to prepare, So the idea is not to never have these things, but it's to eat as mostly whole food as you can. And then when you're not able to do that, which is totally fine, just choosing things that are minimally processed. So an example of that might be like a rice blend mixture that's in a box. Totally fine, right? Really convenient. Maybe not double fried chocolate dipped donuts kind of thing. So the last one is fit in fiber. So fiber is super important for all kinds of reasons. It helps regular digestion. It's really good for the colon health, as well as blood sugar balance, all kinds of things. So making sure we're getting soluble fiber like apples, oats, things that kind of feel gelatinous, if you think about that. And then insoluble, so things like greens, veggies, grains, anything that has kind of roughage, if you will. So making sure we're getting all kinds of fiber in our diet. And so those are good, just sort of general principles, as I said, as a foundation of good health to kind of focus on. And then next we'll kind of talk about some of some of the specifics. All right. So eating for hormone balance, like I said, we're going to get a little bit more specific here, expanding on those general foundations, but then talking about how you can eat to support your hormonal health. Okay, so which hormones are we talking about exactly? So hormones are this big umbrella of essentially chemicals or factors in our bodies that have different functions, right? And this list of six is by no means all of them or not even close, but it's some of the major ones that you've probably heard of. So hormones play a really crucial role in women's health. They influence all kinds of bodily functions as well as our overall well-being, how we feel, all kinds of things. So the left side, these first three are what are known as sex hormones. Estrogen is the primary female sex hormone, and it's responsible for so many different things. I've abbreviated a ton here, but really regulating menstrual cycles, reproductive health, things like that. Progesterone, you can think of it kind of on a seesaw. Progesterone balances estrogen. It works alongside it to support, it can support pregnancy by preparing the uterus for implantation. So if you think about your sort of monthly cycle, estrogen peaks in the first half and progesterone peaks in the second half. And so it works, they sort of work to balance each other out. Um, Testosterone, you think of that maybe more as it relates to men or male hormones, but women have it too. And it's really important actually for women for a lot of reasons. It's present in smaller amounts relative to men, but it's important for muscle growth and mass and retention of muscle as we age, libido, energy levels, just to name a few. And as women, again, it's important to have all three of these present at their correct levels relative to each other. Um, on the right side, we have a couple of other hormones that are also really important. So cortisol, maybe you've heard of this as the stress hormone. This actually helps regulate metabolism, immune response. It helps us, like I said, stress, but manage our stress. If it's really high, we're going to feel pretty stressed. If it's low, we're not so much. So cortisol has a role. There's such thing as sort of good stress or productive stress in short amounts, but it's not something that we want to see chronically. And so it's important to kind of keep tabs on that and make sure that it's, not staying elevated for a long time. Then we have thyroid hormones. This is a group of hormones. I haven't listed them all out explicitly here, but the main thing to know here is that they're essential for regulating metabolism and energy levels and then overall growth. So you could have something called hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid, and that can have symptoms related to some of those things, or hyperthyroidism, which is the opposite. So an overactive thyroid, and that can have kind of the opposite set of symptoms. So we won't go into too much detail, but just to be aware, these are some of the hormones at play. And then lastly, insulin. So someone in the chat mentioned blood sugar. Insulin controls our blood sugar levels, and it's really vital for energy production. And want to make sure that insulin is balanced so that we're having consistently stable blood sugar. So yeah, understanding all of these hormones and their functions is really key to addressing hormonal imbalances and maintaining our overall health. All right, so then we have kind of this endless pursuit of hormone balance, right? So we've got all these hormones floating around. You often hear, or maybe you think to yourself, or I know I've felt like, oh, I'm feeling crazy. My hormones are out of balance. Like it happens. It happens a lot. And we've got a lot of hormones to figure out how to balance, right? So this idea of hormone balance refers to having the optimal levels of interaction between these various hormones in the body. So we want that balance, which leads to stability of mood, energy, as well as kind of overall health. And achieving and maintaining this balance is really, important, but it can feel very elusive. So one thing we can look out for with kind of trying to assess whether our hormones are imbalanced are certain symptoms and signs. So some of the common signs of hormone imbalances include irregular periods, unexplained weight gain or loss that can be related to hypo or hyperthyroidism, mood swings, fatigue, skin changes, digestive issues. I mean, the symptom list is probably actually that long, but some of those things can be good indicators to say, hey, something's off. Now, a caveat to that is, some of that's normal because our hormones do naturally fluctuate, as I said, through the month, through our lives at these different stages. And so it's helpful to know, okay, what are normal fluctuations here and what are things that maybe shouldn't be going on. And I find that's one of the hardest things for women to kind of assess for themselves because, again, we're not usually taught, at least I wasn't, what is normal to expect throughout the month potentially. Is it normal to have PMS or not? Is it normal to have mood changes when you're 40 and maybe you're going through perimenopause? What are those things that are typical to expect? And when are there some things that are not comfortable, not correct, and things that we may want to kind of course correct and make sure can come into more balance? So, when that happens, hormone imbalances that are not caused by those normal cycles, they can be caused by a lot of different factors. So stress, poor diet, lack of sleep, exposure to toxins in our environment, aging, certain medical conditions. And, often in our world, women are going to have more than one of these things going on, which can lead to feeling not so great. So, in the next slide, we'll talk about a couple of the things we can do to use diet to kind of address some of these issues. Great. So, I will caveat this slide by saying, again, this is very high level, but it's kind of a good basis to say, all right, what can I do generally as a foundation to kind of try to make sure that my hormones are balanced using my diet? So, eating for hormone balance involves focusing on key nutrients and foods that support hormonal health. And there are a couple of key players here. So, omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in fatty fish, flax seeds, walnuts, they reduce inflammation and also support hormone production. So, our hormones are made of some of these fatty acids, some of our hormones. And so, having enough of these is really important. And when it comes to omega-3s, you've maybe heard of omega-6s. It's important to have the correct ratio between the two. And I sometimes find, and within the American diet, generally, the ratio is inverted. So we have a lot of omega-6s, not so many omega-3s. So that's why it can be important to kind of intentionally fit those in either through diet or supplementation where that is appropriate. The next one is fiber. So I touched on fiber a little bit, but its role in helping regulate blood sugar and estrogen levels is really essential here. So fiber present in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, helps control some of those things and make them basically think of fiber as sort of stability, right? They're sort of the structure as the plant within our bodies. They cause a lot of stability as it relates to blood sugar as well as hormone production, specifically estrogen. And then protein. So women tend to undereat protein generally, and especially as we age. Older adults overall tend to undereat protein. And protein is so, so, so important for many things, for maintaining and building of muscle, for our kind of bone structure and joint support, things that tend to deteriorate, especially for women as we age. Um, so including sources of protein from lean meats, eggs, legumes is really essential for hormone production as well as kind of muscle maintenance and bone strength, as well as joints. Then we have, leafy greens, berries, cruciferous vegetables. All of those are going to be rich in your micronutrients and antioxidants, which also support hormone balance. So again, kind of eating the rainbow, getting three colors in, that's a great way to say, do I have enough of these kind of micronutrients and antioxidants? Because those are good visual indicators there. And those are going to be, when I say micronutrients, I mean vitamins and minerals. So all different kinds of vitamins. We'll touch on that a little bit more in a sec. But getting those in through vegetables is a great practice. And then we have nuts and seeds, again, another source of omega-3s, and then whole grains for fiber. And then kind of at the bottom here, just some foods to avoid or limit or moderate, maybe a better word there. We want to avoid those refined sugars, those processed foods, sometimes excess caffeine, alcohol, trans fats, artificial additives, all of these things, especially in consort together, can disrupt hormonal balance. So, by making some of these dietary kind of pivots and choices, it can be helpful to manage generally hormone health overall and just sort of set the foundation there of good hormone balance. And that way we can say, all right, this is sort of our baseline. We're doing all the general things we can do. Now, how do we look at specifically our unique and personal needs to make things even better? And so, to answer that question, which is how do we look at this for ourselves in a really personalized way, um, that is where a dietitian can come into play. So, yeah, maybe you're thinking this is kind of already a lot to manage, like, and we haven't even gotten to the different stages yet. Um, well, a dietitian could be a really great resource for you to help you kind of assess that for yourself. So, before we jumped into some of the specifics there, I do want to share just a little more about dietitians in general. Um, First, they're the only nutrition professional who is licensed and credentialed to provide medical nutrition guidance. So, a lot of words. Why does that matter? Well, unlike a coach or even a nutritionist, they are able to look at lab values. They are able to consider your other health conditions that you've got going on, any medications that you may be on, and work with you to develop this unique plan that is complementary to your specific needs and goals. So, meeting with a dietitian is such a great way to get this personalized guidance that is adaptable to you as your needs change. And they can just be a really great accountability partner, sounding board, and support system as you're working alongside the rest of your kind of care team, your providers, other folks in your medical kind of care, whatever that looks like. And yeah, just to help you feel your best. So we know everyone is super busy and it could be really hard to prioritize something like this. So we make it really easy to meet with a dietitian over the phone or virtually over Zoom. They can be available on nights and weekends, so you can really make it work for your schedule. We also work with many health insurance plans and continuously are adding more. So, we want to try to bring this to people for as little to no cost as possible. So, when you click the link that Jared has, and we'll drop in the chat again to schedule, you can sort through a list of the health and insurance plans that we work with and try to select or see if we cover yours. And yeah, if you do schedule your visit by 5:31, you will be entered to win our $250 giveaway. So make sure you don't miss out on that opportunity. And I will just add here, the code is woman. There you go. All right. So now we're going to finally get into it. Nutrition needs at every stage. So we're going to look at how hormones change at several primary phases in a woman's life, from adolescence to the primary fertile years, including a brief mention of pregnancy and breastfeeding. We will also look at perimenopause and menopause. And so for each of these phases, we're going to discuss the unique symptoms along with other health considerations and what that means for the types of nutrients that are most supportive for women in those phases. Now, this is a broad overview, so we could do an entire webinar on each of these stages, but this is meant to demonstrate how our needs change over the course of our lives and how nutrition can be supportive in helping us adapt to those needs. All right. So to begin, we have adolescence. Adolescence is a critical period of growth and development, usually ranges from about 10 to 19. Maybe we have some late adolescents on the call, or maybe many of you have daughters, or at least someone in your life who is in this age range. And at the very least, all of us can probably remember being in this time. So during adolescence, we know that girls experience rapid physical changes. This includes height and weight increases, as well as the onset of menstruation, which typically occurs between 12 and 14, although this age has skewed younger in recent years. Um, Nutrition needs during this time are really heightened due to all of these rapid changes. So, calcium and vitamin D are going to be essential for bone development, where iron is going to be crucial to support, especially as they enter into menstruation, the increased blood volume and loss on a regular basis. Protein is needed for muscle development, and then healthy fats are important for brain growth. So you'll see I have this pretty much on every slide, the kind of bold vegetables, fruit, whole grains, legumes at the bottom. That's going to be important at every stage and phase. Like, again, it's just bringing that sort of foundational principle there and then adding on top of that, what are some of the nutrients that we want to focus on during this time? So adolescence is also a time where women are incredibly self-aware, and they sort of begin to establish their sense of self and self-image. Um, on top of a time where there are increasing, especially due to the internet, societal pressures, right? So it also unfortunately happens to be when a lot of disordered eating patterns tend to manifest. And so it's really important, just as a person supporting an adolescent girl, to reinforce healthy eating behaviors and a positive body image. And that, even just saying that, seems like a really daunting and sort of difficult thing to do. And this is something that a dietitian can be really helpful in doing, just sort of being that third party, maybe if it's like a mother daughter or a relationship. They can be that third party to offer some insights and kind of help there, breaking down maybe some of those barriers around that topic. So, if that resonates, meeting with a dietitian might be a great idea, but also just generally to support all of the changes that are happening at this sort of phase in life. It can be a great time to set foundational good practices that can carry them through the rest of their lives. Next, we have this gigantic phase of time, ages 20 to 40, known as the reproductive years. So these are just kind of clinically categorized by regular menstrual cycles. We have peak fertility going on, sometimes pregnancy and childbirth. And during this time, this is when women, because they have regular cycles, are experiencing those monthly hormonal fluctuations that we talked about. Those can impact mood, energy levels, cravings for, and aversions to certain foods, and overall health. So, some nutritional items of focus during these years are going to include maintaining hormonal balance, right? We talked about that. So, going back to sort of that foundational hormonal balance slide, like what are some things anyone can kind of focus on to help there? But then also looking at specific nutrients like potentially folate if you are trying to optimize for fertility or are in the early stages of pregnancy. Iron is also going to continue to be really important to replenish menstrual losses. And this persists from whenever you start your period all the way through until kind of perimenopause and menopause. And even then for different reasons. But we have iron, we have omega-3 fatty acids again, but in this instance, it's more reducing inflammation, again, supporting hormonal health. Magnesium can be something that's helpful if you do have PMS symptoms. It's sort of, or high cortisol for that matter, or struggle with sleep. It can be just a really great nutrient to focus on there, and that helps, yeah, just sort of bring everything back, settle things down, reduce inflammation as well. Um, and so, yeah, focusing on a balanced diet, again, rich in all these nutrients is going to be really helpful. Um, and when we're looking at some of these nutrients too, you may think like, well, how do I know if I need folate or iron, or how do I know if my iron is low? It can be helpful to, work with your provider to have some of these levels tested, particularly iron. That is one that is sometimes routinely checked by a provider for women in this sort of phase. The others are probably able to be obtained through diet. So, yeah, again, something you can assess with your provider and also a dietitian to determine like, is this something you're low in? Is it something that you're not getting for certain reason? If it's in your diet, maybe there's some digestive malabsorption going on, in which case supplementation may be recommended. So again, something to work out on a personal basis, of course, but yeah, it's something to focus on there. And then lastly on this slide, back one more. Sorry, back to the other slide, please. There we go. Protein. Just wanted to have a quick mention of protein continuing to be important and just how much there we have, aiming for around 1 to 1.5 kilograms of protein per body weight, or grams per kilogram of body weight, excuse me. So let's say if you're 150 pounds, that's what, roughly 60 kilograms. So getting around 120 kilograms, or sorry, grams of protein per day is probably a good kind of place to start. And it's really important during this um, phase, this really long 20-year phase, because actually we see that peak bone mass actually happens around the age of 30, which means beyond that, we're not building as much bone mass. So this is really the time that you are getting set up for good bone health as you age. And so, really prioritizing protein alongside weight bearing exercise is critical to establishing that bone and joint health. And weight bearing exercise can mean weightlifting, it can mean anything that's jumping or running or even walking, just putting weight on your body and moving it around. Really important. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so within the reproductive years, we have pregnancy, which again can occur anytime during any of these years. The kind of notable signs are it brings this increased caloric and nutrient need, and that's to support fetal development, of course, right? As well as maternal health as the mother carries the child. So, early signs of pregnancy include missed periods, morning sickness, fatigue. We have breast changes, and then throughout pregnancy, we're going to see gradual weight gain. Some of the nutritional needs to focus on during pregnancy include folate, and that's, we talked about folate being important for fertility, but it's really important during early pregnancy to prevent something called neural tube defects, which is a birth defect that can be, as I said, prevented by having adequate folate. Iron is also needed. In this case, it's to support that increased blood volume. So your blood volume sort of doubles, sometimes triples when you are pregnant. And so we need enough iron to ensure that that blood is rich and in nutrients. Calcium and vitamin D for the baby's bone development. Protein is essential again for fetal tissue growth. You're growing a human. So what are humans made of? Same things that we are. We need protein for tissue. We need protein for muscle. We need omega-3 fatty acids and fats in general, lots of fats for healthy brain development. Initially, the baby's brain is really all fat. So that's absolutely critical. Um, and, a balanced diet is going to help ensure that the baby is getting what he or she needs, and also the mother has a healthy and safe pregnancy. Um, One of the primary things to manage during pregnancy are going to be food cravings and aversions, which can make getting adequate nutrition difficult. So sometimes starting the day with like a nutrient dense meal, trying to get all of this or as much of this earlier in the day can help. Or maybe incorporating something like smoothies, that can be a great way to manage just this varying appetite. Because, we have this idea of the perfect nutrition plan on paper, but then there are a lot of symptoms associated with pregnancy that make it difficult to get those things in. The other thing to be aware of during pregnancy is consuming a lot of sugar. So, this can put mothers at an increased risk of developing something called gestational diabetes, which is in no way directly caused by eating sugar. It's actually caused by some of the many hormone changes related to insulin, as we learned about, and making it difficult for insulin to clear sugar out of the blood. And also, the baby is very sensitive to sugar. So, while it doesn't cause it, we do know that eating a whole lot of sugar it can exacerbate the effect there and make it maybe more likely that someone might develop that. So, certainly not something to avoid, but just something to be aware of. And then lastly, the only real area where there are, excuse me, this is the only real area where there are considerations around foods to avoid. So all of the other phases, it's sort of like we have these general recommendations around types of foods to avoid or moderate, but this one's really important. So and I find this is something that, new moms or pregnant women have a lot of concern and there's a lot of debate around. So this is sort of the general guidance I will offer. It is obviously up to the mother. Um, but related to foods that we should avoid, alcohol. There are birth defects associated with consuming alcohol during pregnancy. Raw meats, things like sushi or undercooked meat is important to avoid. And really, what we're trying to look out for there are things like foodborne illnesses like listeria that can cross the placenta and affect the baby. So, avoiding things like raw meats, sushi, even things like deli salads, those tend to carry a higher amount of harmful bacteria like listeria. And then some large fish that can contain mercury. So some types of tuna is an example of that. So those are something to again talk with your provider, talk with your dietitian about, and figure out sort of what is the right practice for you. Okay, so we've been pregnant, now we've had a baby, and breastfeeding is, something for some mothers that follows the pregnancy, and this can last from birth up to 2 years or even beyond that. Um, This stage requires still a higher caloric and fluid intake to support milk production. So some of the common signs that we're breastfeeding are going to include breast changes, increased hunger and thirst, and then you'll also notice some postpartum weight loss associated with breastfeeding. It helps sort of bring hormones back into balance as well, but it can also be a pretty difficult period emotionally. It can not breastfeeding itself, but just this period it can affect or can cause mood swings, postpartum depression is common. Um, and yeah, those are all of the hormones trying to get back into that elusive state of balance. So it can be kind of a tumultuous time. So we want to make sure that we're supporting ourselves as best as we can through nutrition. And so some of the nutritional needs include increased protein, and that's to support milk production, calcium that helps protect maternal bone density. There's an interesting little phenomenon that happens with bones during pregnancy and also postpartum, where nutrients can be leached from bones a little bit more easily. So, continuing to have calcium to support that, as well as ensure that the breast milk includes calcium, is important. Including healthy fats. Again, this sort of baseline diet to make sure that all of the nutrients that the baby needs are within breast milk and we're supporting that as well as ourselves. And then adequate hydration. That probably seems pretty intuitive, but you are providing hydration to a newborn. And so it's important to replenish that. Um, and then breastfeeding, many moms may also notice that their baby is sensitive to certain foods that they consume. So this can be really interesting and also kind of a source of stress sometimes. Caffeine is a common sensitivity. So a mother might notice that when they drink coffee and then breastfeed or pump and then feed the child the milk later, that the child has sort of a fussiness associated with consuming milk that has some caffeine in it. This isn't always the case, but it's one of the more common ones that people notice. Sometimes sugar can do something similar, alcohol. People comment on the baby seeming to act different after they've had alcohol. There are certainly ways to work around that if you are to consume alcohol and timing related to pumping or breastfeeding. Um, and then other times, mothers can detect an allergy or an allergy-like response in their baby. This can be, again, really frustrating and kind of stressful to navigate, but another really good opportunity to work with a dietitian who can help you sort of navigate these situations alongside of your provider, your OB, and yeah, come to a place that is healthy for you and the baby. All right. So we're jumping forward a little bit to perimenopause. This is a really nebulous period of time. And, I have some folks that I've worked with and also in my personal life that their sort of retelling of this period of time is like, no one prepared me for this. Like, what is going on? I thought I was just sort of in the clear until menopause. And then this sort of craziness comes in, and you can see the age range here is late 30s to early 50s. So this is a wide sort of birth of time. And it's unclear to a lot of women that they are in perimenopause. It just is it's something that they maybe they start feeling unlike themselves and sort of trial and error trying to figure out what's going on. So it can be kind of the wild, wild west, but we'll demystify it here a little bit. So yeah, as I said, it's gonna some of the symptoms that you may look out for are regular periods. So potentially you've had regular periods for your whole life and you see some changes going on there. That's sort of maybe something's going on. Um, I've actually heard periods referred to as sort of the fifth vital sign or the sixth vital sign. Either way, the next one. And so that's interesting. It's a good tell that something is off or going on. Hot flashes. This is a big one that can be really telling. A lot of women think they're in menopause, but it could just be perimenopause. So it's sudden warmth, sweating, sort of out of nowhere. Night sweats are another big one. Mood changes, another big one. You have perimenopause, you've got hormones sort of all over the place. And it's sort of like persistent PMS feeling, I've heard it described as. So any sorts of increases in irritability, anxiety, some depression, that can indicate perimenopause, and then sleep disturbances. It's difficulty falling or staying asleep. So, yeah, it's quite a time. Some nutritional strategies that can help be supportive during perimenopause include really just focusing on managing the symptoms and supporting hormone balance. So, doing whatever we can to mitigate some of the what is natural because it is sort of the transitional phase, but trying to mitigate some of the symptoms related to the hormone imbalance. So, again, Some of the same ones, but for a little bit different reasons. Magnesium continues to be really supportive here for sleep and mood regulation. Calcium, vitamin D, same thing. We need to maintain that bone density. B vitamins actually can help maintain energy levels and mood stability. A lot of times there can be fatigue associated with perimenopause, or just sort of mood instability, as I said, but B vitamins, specifically B12 and B6, can help a lot with this. And then, of course, just maintaining that sort of general recommendation here for a balanced diet. And if anyone on this call has experienced perimenopause, you know, this doesn't scratch the surface of sort of all that can be done to help during this phase. And so again, another great opportunity to work with a dietitian, who can assess really your unique situation, your symptomology, how you're feeling, any medications that maybe your provider is having you try, maybe related to hormone replacement or anything similar. Um, they can really help give those specific recommendations. So definitely worth considering. Okay, and then we have menopause. So this typically occurs um, between 45 and 55, and it's defined simply by the end of menstruation. And it's marked by 12 consecutive months without a period. So you should be able to distinguish that from irregularity within your period. Common symptoms can feel really similar to perimenopause. Yay. But it includes hot flashes, night sweats, irregular mood. You might notice more changes in your skin and hair. Things related to dryness are also very common. And this is sort of when women start seeing an increased risk of some of those bone related conditions, so osteoporosis, as well as some cardiovascular changes. So, all of the sort of work that we've done up till now has been to try to hedge against what naturally tends to occur related to deterioration of bone health as well as cardiovascular health. So there are still things that are important to prioritize within menopause itself that focus on maintaining bone and heart health, as well as mitigating some of those other symptoms related or that we kind of talked about with perimenopause. So calcium and vitamin D are going to continue to be really important. This may be when you may start supplementing with calcium. Again, up to dietitian and provider, but something to consider. Omega 3s have supported and should continue to support heart health. And then fiber also becomes really important here. We also see some changes with digestive health within menopause. And so fiber can help with regularity there. It can also help again with sort of insulin response. And so sometimes we also see it in addition to sort of bone health related conditions, cardiovascular disease, and then also conditions related to insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, those sorts of things tend to manifest over time. And so this is generally the age range when some of those things might show up. And so it's continually important to make sure we're getting fiber and try to mitigate some of those effects as well. And then antioxidants, always really important, combating all of that oxidative stress. So again, maintaining that sort of baseline healthy diet. All right, and then we have postmenopause. So we're talking about this because it does have, a little bit of nuance there and important, right? So 55 is not old. There's still a lot we can do to prioritize our health through nutrition. And so um, we'll talk about it here. This period of time is, typically around the age of 55 and older. So during this stage, hormone levels tend to stabilize. This can feel like quite the reprieve for some women after some of the more tumultuous years from perimenopause and menopause. Um, you know, while symptoms of menopause may decrease, it's really important to focus on that bone health because you are going to see some bone density loss, and other heart conditions tend to manifest here as well. So, similar to menopause, it is still important to kind of focus on maintaining health and vitality. So, protein continues to be really, really important for preserving muscle mass. I mentioned this earlier, but older adults tend to lose a lot of muscle mass over time. There's a natural decline in that, but there's a lot we can do to kind of preserve as much as we can. Um, Calcium and vitamin D continue to be supportive for bone health. healthy fats for heart health, and hydration is really essential for maintaining skin health and sort of overall well-being. Um, so a balanced diet here, tailored to those needs, as well as an active lifestyle, making sure we're staying active. It's even more critical as we age. So prioritize walking every day, still engaging in weight-bearing exercise. Swimming can be a really great option that's easy on the joints. All of this is really important in conjunction with diet to help maintain vitality as we age. All right, so we just sped through an entire lifespan. What I hope that you gained from this is really just how complex and ever changing we are as women throughout our lives, and how at each of these different stages it is important and we deserve to, have our needs met and to expect that as our needs change, we can support them with nutrition. And so finding a support system that can adapt with you and carry you through all these different seasons is such an important step to take towards your overall well-being. So with that, let's talk about where to go from here. Okay, so first, we are going to want to identify, if you're like, hey, this all sounds great, like I want to do better in with my nutrition to help support whatever phase of life I'm in. What can I do? First, identify what area of your life you're in. So, are you trying to get pregnant? Are you in perimenopause limbo? Are you unsure? That's okay too. Um, Try to identify or assess where you might be or what you might be close to. And then reflect on your current nutritional habits and patterns. Maybe look back at the slide based on where you are in life and ask, am I getting enough of this nutrient or that nutrient? Do I have this kind of foundation of baseline diet? And are there any areas where I might be lacking? Um, then it's important to define what wellness looks like to you in this moment in life. What would good look like or feel like? And that could mean I just want more energy, or I want to be able to sleep better, or I want to be able to do this thing with my kids. Maybe you even write this down as your little North Star of sort of what would great look like for you in this time in life. And then spend some time thinking about, and you can look at references on the previous slide, but what's holding you back? If this is your North Star, what are some of the things, some aspects, life, time, any of those things that are holding you back from getting to where you want to be? And then it's a great time to set up a call with a dietitian who can take everything that you've sort of worked out in steps 1 through 4 and develop your plan that is just for you and helps you work through your unique needs, whatever stage you're in. And then lastly, your dietitian is going to help you over time adapt as your needs change. So they are always working alongside you to achieve your best self. So, yeah, with that, that is all I have for you today. I feel like I sped through a lot, but somehow it's 12:54. So we have a couple of minutes for questions.